I believe you gave yourself an ultimatum that you must make a feature film.
Yeah.
What happened?
So, I'd had the project back in 2017, back in Mississippi. I'd had a project fall through, crumble. And, I really thought that was going to be my chance to make a feature film. Didn't happen. Moved to LA. There were a couple other opportunities where I was trying to get things together. I never got as close as that project, but talking to people about putting financing together, talking to people about putting a crew together. I started casting right before COVID. I actually had kind of started shooting a very low budget project that I was was going to be a feature film, and then COVID happened, and it just fell apart because all the momentum died. People moved away after COVID. It was devastating because consistently trying to make something and then have it fall to pieces was just as a creator, you just feel like it's like blow after blow, and you're like, okay, when am I going to actually be able to get something over the finish line? And then in 2023, after kind of having a script that I really thought was going to be my next project, it just wasn't coming together. I looked in the mirror and I was like, okay, I'm looking at a filmmaker who's never made a feature film. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep waking up every morning and looking in the mirror and seeing that. I've got to fix that, whatever that is. And so I said, by the end of this year, come hell or high water, I'm going to make a feature film. And I didn't even really have a script at that point. I was just like, I've got to do something. And this was like in January, February of 2023. In March, I think it started to become clear that there was a story that I was kind of interested in. And then I was able to kind of write a script pretty quickly. And then I spent even when we were filming, I was still kind of working on the script because it was such a fast turnaround. And I knew I've got to keep working on, I knew it was going to be one of those things where I'm shooting and working on the script. I just knew that. I kind of accepted that once I kind of made the decision to set that deadline. And something about setting a deadline really just helped be like, all right, it's got to happen. And maybe if I needed to push it a little bit, I maybe still could have finished it, but just having that deadline, say I'm starting in November shooting no matter what. And that really kind of it was like, all right, it's not going to be perfect. It might not even be good, but it's going to get done.
When we think about your homeless Las Vegas short film, that looks like a story that needs to be told. With your first feature film, Death Cipher, was it a movie that had to be told, or was it that you had to make the movie?
I think in many ways I had to make the movie. I think that was really always the reason. I think it was mostly like a creative endeavor. I've got to make this. I'm a feature filmmaker. I've got to make a feature film. But as I've, finished the film and looked at the story, I think it still has a lot of those elements that exist in some of the documentaries I've made, where there is, the internet is something that consistently isolates people and creates strife between people. And it can be a very deceptive place because you look on Instagram and you look at how great people's lives are, and you think, well, I'm not that. My life doesn't like that, right? And then you come to find out that a lot of these people also are very unhappy, but they're putting on this show. I think that if you were to dig really deeply into the film, you would see that the heart of it is kind of about that. It's about the dangers of the internet, and that is something that it is something our society should be thinking about, and there are discussions about it, but we use it every day. We interact with it. It shapes the way we see reality, and I think that's something I kind of wanted to explore with Death Cipher was, how does the internet shape how we see the world? How does it shape how we see ourselves? And I think all that stuff exists there, but at the same time, if I'm really being honest, I just made it for myself. I had to make it. I'm so proud that it's out there in the world and people can see it, and I hope that the people who do watch it enjoy it, and I hope that they see some of that in it. But I made it to also be sort of open to interpretation. So if you see that in there, great. If you see something else, then that's also interesting.
How hard is it to find a movie idea that you think has to be made? Are you always thinking of ideas? Do you have so many ideas that that's not really irrelevant?
I have a journal full of ideas, and some of them are great and some of them aren't, but what's interesting is like even something that I write down is like, this isn't a great idea, like that live streamer thing with Cipher. It's like 3 months later, suddenly it becomes brilliant because I see a new way, a new direction with it. And, when it comes to making a film, like, or getting an idea and like looking at it and saying, okay, this has to be made. I think I always start with like, am I interested in this idea? Like, does it interest me? And then the second question is like, okay, what do I think this could find an audience or have some sort of, legs out there in the world? That's a secondary question. I think the primary question is always like, okay, can I commit 2 years of my life to making this? And I think there has to be something about it that attracts me to the idea. And then, the question of, is it valuable to the world, I think will sort of become apparent, or even as ideas develop, like I think those elements of like an idea becoming interesting to an audience or you developing it into something that could maybe make an impact to culture or society, that stuff sometimes comes later.
And so it took you a year to actually write and film the movie and then another year for post?
It took about, if I'd had a full budget and everything, I probably could have knocked it out in a few months. But I think a lot of the time, I had pretty much had it edited by May, and then a lot of the time was waiting for like the score, the sound design, some of the other things were required other people on the team, and they were, it was such a low budget that they're kind of working in between other things. But it took a little bit longer, I think, because of the level of budget I was at. But yeah, it was about a little less than a year, maybe 11 months after shooting. It was kind of finally done, and then it took a little, and then I kind of was waiting for festivals to finish to hear whether I get it or not, and so that kind of delayed some of the distribution process as well.
And so the entire budget was $4,000?
Yes.
Wow, and you had the equipment and you did all the editing?
Yeah, I mean, anywhere that I could commit my skills instead of, trying to source them out and pay for them, I did, because I just couldn't afford. I mean, I would love to have a full crew. I'd love to pay everyone, $12,000 a day or more, whatever. I'll pay $1 million a day if I had the money to, like, for anyone else to do the job instead of me. But unfortunately, just at the budget we're at, a lot of the task fell to me to do, so I ended up doing a lot of the props. I had people come in and help with different things, like some of the set design and some of the wardrobe I was able to get some people to help with, but anytime it was like I could do it, I just did it.
Did you start with the $4,000 budget, or did it simply end up being that?
I did not start out with any specific number. I was like, however cheaply I can make this, that's what I want to make it for. And then eventually we were just kind of spending slowly over time. And I mean, that was the cost all in for everything. So during production, it was, a little bit less, and then, yeah, I was just like, wherever I can save, let's save. And then by the end of it, I had spent about $4,000.
And then you mentioned on another podcast, I think it was Noam Kroll's podcast, that a lot of times you'll see a film that's in one location and there's a lot of stuff that just bores you after a while. What are some of those issues? And what are some of the things that actually intrigue you about a one location shoot?
I'm going to answer that question by talking about a different genre, which is the road movie.
Okay.
So the road movie is this idea that you're physically moving from location to location. And what can tend to happen with road movies, and I think when they become stale, is you're moving physically, but you're not moving emotionally or character arc-wise, right? So that there's almost a false movement in the story. I think one location movies then have the same problem, but then there's no movement at all because you're in the location. So people get trapped in like a story that has no emotional movement, no dramatic movement. And sometimes because you're in the same location, it feels like you're kind of revisiting the same conflict over and over again. And so I was always hesitant to do a one-location film because of that trap. When I kind of figured out the concept for Death Cipher and realized, okay, I can kind of find ways to add some of that physical movement, and then the character arc of Nora was so clear to me from the beginning of like the movement she was going to go on. I was like, okay, I feel confident making this and doing this film.
Right, she definitely has a very, very dramatic arc, and so I can see how, you know, and also too, a lot of what's happening in the film is she's actually not saying anything. Is you got an actress that was so expressive with her eyes that you're seeing different things and sort of this isolation that she's experiencing. I don't want to give away too much.
No, and Ashley was so, like, I mean, that, like, the whole thing is like, as soon as she read, I knew she was Nora. We had, I think, 8 different actresses read for the part for callbacks, and when she read, I just knew that, like, she had the strength, she had the versatility, she had everything, and underneath all that strength, there's also vulnerability. So, and that's all Nora. Like, she is this person who is very strong on the surface, but actually very, very wounded and vulnerable on the inside. And Ashley brought that in so many ways. Even when she's just sitting there watching some of the videos, like, you know, the expression. Sometimes her face is blank, but she's watching it, you know, and it's still interesting. And that was another thing that's fascinating to me about film is, like, you can watch someone watch a video and still have an emotional experience, you know, and I've seen other movies do that as well. And it's just, I think that's something that's so incredible about film is like because we've all watched a video and had a reaction to it, and so you're being pulled into this moment. And if I do my job, then it feels real, and you're right there on the journey with the main character.
When you started writing the screenplay, did you know it was going to be a female, or did you have a male in mind? Was it always Nora?
It was always Nora. I can't even really say why. I think maybe because of that was how the character just formed in my mind. It just seemed like something, it felt right. And you know, it just seemed like the right fit for this story. Yeah.
And so where did you come up with the idea of Nora's story for Death Cipher?
Actually, I'd had an idea a few months before about, you know, like a live streamer or something with the internet where it was like, oh, it could be kind of like, maybe it's just all in this one room and she's just on the computer and you're just kind of watching her interact with her fans or something. And that was kind of interesting, but it felt like too contained. But then as I was thinking about, okay, what kind of story could I tell? I decided right away, okay, I'm gonna make a film in my apartment. That's my location, and it's gonna be totally contained. And once I kind of made that decision, it's like, okay, well, what kind of story could I tell in my apartment that would actually be interesting? Because I think that was the other thing, is like, I still want it to be interesting, because I've seen a lot of one location films that they get kind of boring. You kind of start losing the steam towards the end because you've been in this one location the whole time. But then the idea came that, like, well, what if, like, if she's interacting with the computer, you could kind of use videos and some of the things she's interacting with to sort of maybe get out of the apartment in a very subtle way, so you don't necessarily feel like you're just totally contained. And that also kind of mirrors our life experience, because we are constantly sitting at a computer and then seeing the world and experiencing it digitally. So then, okay, now here's something that feels real, but also I can maybe inject some drama into it. And so as I thought about that, I'd also read this story about a journalist who had you know, faked some sources and kind of screwed up. And so it was that, all that stuff started like kind of just mixing in my mind, and I was like, okay, there's something here. And then as I started putting some creative energy to it, like Nora, the character of Nora kind of became very clear. The storyline, sort of her exploring this dark web puzzle on the internet, sort of almost as like a quest. She's on a quest through the internet to discover these things and sort of figure out where this missing girl is.
And then did you put casting notices out through the normal channels?
Yeah, I did casting through Breakdown Express, Actors Access, and I think we had, you know, and I was very honest through the whole process. Like, this is a micro budget, no budget kind of thing, and I think we still had like 600 people submit for the role. And I think that just speaks to like, there's just a lot of people out there who want to be, it's not always about the money. It's about like, I want an opportunity to be in a cool story, play the main role in a cool story. And that is sometimes more valuable than money. And so I think when making the films at the budget I'm at, the value offer I'm trying to make is, hey, like I want us to make a really cool project together, tell a cool story, and make something that we can all be proud of. And that's the offer I'm making. I'm not making a monetary offer, right? So you have to find ways to still make the offer valuable, because it's not always about the money, especially at this budget. Like you're thinking, okay, can this be a stepping stone in someone's career? If someone gets a credit as the main role in a feature film, that's almost more valuable than money, because it's so hard to get that sometimes.
Right, and she really does carry the film, and she's amazing. So
yeah, it's the Nora show. So she was incredible, and I'm so thankful to have collaborators like that. I mean, we were constantly having this conversation throughout of like, hey, how did that feel? Did that feel right? Was that Nora? And like she even brought her own voice, and like she had a little bit of control and like saying like, was that right for the character, that reaction, that moment? And so it's a collaboration, and that's, I think, where the extroverted nature comes in, where I'm like, okay, I'm working with someone to create like a living character, but the process is also kind of alive, because we're constantly saying, okay, was that the right choice? I mean, acting is about choices. So was that the right choice for Nora?
How did you decide on 12 shooting days?
That sort of just came out of, I figured out that like the best thing to do, because of people's work schedules and stuff, we do Friday, Saturday, Sunday shoots. And then because of the way it fell, we were shooting in November and December, and then we actually took 2 weeks off for Thanksgiving. So it was just kind of like, if we wanted to get it done before the end of the year, it's like we do these 4 weekends, and that's kind of, then it was Christmas. So it's kind of was just sort of the nature of like, this is kind of the what we have in the schedule available.
But you said even with Death Cipher that you were revising the script or adding to it even while shooting?
Yeah, and even that was some discovery, because something that, okay, I'll tell you one thing that happened on Death Cipher that was totally changed the entire script was the character of Emma, who is the central like drive of the story pretty much from page 6. She was a much smaller character in the script during the casting. Christina, who plays Emma, actually auditioned for Nora.
Okay.
When I saw her audition, she had this vulnerability that was just, it wasn't right for Nora, but I was like, this might be right for Emma, but if it is, then it needs to be a bigger character. And so I actually went back and revised a lot of the second act to make the whole second act became about finding Emma. And that was in the middle of pre-production, casting, everything. And some of that was just the nature of what I was doing, because I'd started writing only 3 months before that. And so I was just kind of trying to, but it was also cool because I was letting the script speak to me. I was letting the casting speak to me. And the process was kind of fun because something would happen in the real world that would affect the script. And then we'd okay, let's go follow that and see what that leads to. And so that was something I've never done before. Usually I have the script fully written out in a way where, it's short films, but at least I know, okay, here's the story, I'm gonna shoot it, right? And maybe you make minor tweaks to dialogue or something, but like changing the entire second act while you're casting is kind of insane. But it made the story better, and that's why I had to do it.
And were you filming Emma in different, at a different time? I don't want to give away too much of the movie, but the way it interacts.
So we actually shot a lot of the stuff that you kind of see throughout the videos and websites you see throughout the film. We made all that before principal photography, actually. So it actually wasn't, I sort of cheated by saying it's like 12 principal photography days, because we did do like a couple days of shooting before, but it was with all these side characters, and it didn't have any of the principal actors in it. So it just kind of became this sort of like, almost like, it was almost part of the pre-production, because I was like shooting it, and then Ashley ended up watching the actual videos and reacting to them in real time. And the reason I wanted to do that, and the reason I did it that way, is because I wanted to make sure that like, as she's watching it, she knows exactly what she's seeing and needs to react to. Because the videos are so strange and have such specific moments that I wanted to make sure that like, I didn't want to have to be doing that thing where you're like, okay, now you're seeing a weird duck guy or something, you know, and so I wanted her to actually see it and react, and I think that helped her performance.
And you've said that even when you rehearse with your actors, this thing happens once they get to set, that because there's so many other variables, that some of that needs to be revived again to kind of get them back in the flow?
Yeah, I think, you know, acting you have to be, at least as a director, the way I see acting is like, you know, the challenge is you want to be present in that moment for the camera. And so it has to at least look like you're listening to what someone else is saying. You're reacting in real time. You've never ever had that thought before in that moment, even though you might have done the take 4 times or you've rehearsed it 50 times before that. And sometimes, you know, with rehearsal, you rehearse it and you get it right on the rehearsal day, but then when you get there on the actual shoot day, I mean, maybe it's been a week since the rehearsal, you know, you went to your job, you had a fight with your boyfriend, you had all these things happen, and now you're coming back into this space trying to bring an emotional, you know, reality that just isn't there right now because of all the things that happened right before you got on set, right? And so then my job as a director is to help the actor recapture that reality and deliver those emotions in a way that feels real and authentic and true in that moment.
How would you do that with Ashley, bringing her back into Nora and what this isolation and some of the fear?
You know, it was a challenge, especially with this film, because I was also operating the camera. And so I was having to like watch the take, think about the lighting, think about we had a lot of camera movement, so I'm having to make sure all that stuff's getting right. And so the challenge with this film was a lot of times I was like having to do the take a few times before I even kind of figured out that what was working and that it was all kind of coming together technically. And then we kind of would get into some of the performance stuff. And I had to lean on Ashley a lot for that. You know, we talked a lot about like, did that feel real for you in that moment? If it didn't, okay, let's talk about the motivation in that moment. What is this scene about? You know, and I think it's just having a conversation about that moment and also talking about, okay, because sometimes you're shooting out of order. So what happened right before this scene and what's going to happen after? So where are you at in the script, in the story arc? That also can help. And, you know, and every actor's different. So I think with Ashley, the nice thing was I think she was able to kind of consistently, you know, tell me how she was feeling about it and like whether it felt real or not. And then we could kind of use that as sort of a metric for like, okay, I need to give you a little bit more on the director's side. And, you know, my goal one day is to only be the director so I can fully be like, I can be fully present and say, okay, you know what, that didn't quite feel right. Let's you know, do that. But I think we kind of had to have a little bit of a symbiosis between us in that sense because of the nature of how we were shooting it.
You've said make your film set fun? Why fun?
Well, again, like this is a no-budget film. We're all doing this for the love of the game, you know? And I think if people show up every day to a set that is stressful and oppressive and a director who doesn't know what he's doing or can't make good choices or is just lost in the technical side of things, then it's not fun. And, you know, because you're not getting paid, I mean, I could just wake up tomorrow and be like, I don't want to go, I'm done. I think most people wouldn't do that, but like if it's bad enough, you might just tap out. You know, maybe the lead actress wouldn't do that, but we had, you know, some crew people, very small crew, and then we had some you know, other actors that I needed to come and participate, and I tried to make sure that everyone that came felt like they were part of the process, having fun, you know, and that was really cool for me because I've been on those sets where it's not fun. I've been on those sets where the director's making choices that actually pisses off the crew, you know, because it doesn't seem like he really has a reason, and it's just actually making our job harder. And I don't want people to feel like that on my sets anyways, but especially if you're not getting paid, like why would I put you through that for, you know, what's the reward? And so if you can make it fun, I mean, I think that's, again, another thing you can offer to someone, hey, you're gonna come do what you love, which is acting, and you're gonna come have fun doing it, and you're gonna be part of the process. You're gonna have a say in your character's, you know, destiny. Like, what actor wouldn't say yes to that, at least if they want, to be part of that?
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.